Our guest tonight is going to tell us how they are going to steal the election of 2008. Greg is going to be with us only for about 30 minutes. We're going to talk to him about how they are going to steal the election from us. He just published a book, like I mentioned earlier, with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. It's a comic book, but actually it's to tell you how they are going to steal your votes. Again, Greg Palast is a investigative reporter for the BBC. Greg, welcome to the program.
Glad to be with you. Yeah, actually, it's a comic book, Steal Back Your Vote, which I co-authored with Bobby Kennedy Jr., voting rights attorney. It's about our investigation of what appears to be a wholesale theft of the vote. Okay.
Now,
and that's
Greg,
what I'm worried about right now.
Okay, good. Let me take you back to 2004, as you mentioned in your writings, that there was actually like votes for our servicemen and women. They were not counted, and also a lot of these votes for like black people, African Americans, they were targeted to actually be eliminated. Tell me, what are you talking about there?
Well, back in 2000. And you can get all this information in the comic book, which is free, by the way. You can download it for free, or you can get hard copies for just the cost of mailing. But download it at stealbackyourvote.org. Now, back in 2000, I'm the reporter that broke the story of how Jeb Bush and Katherine Harris purged tens of thousands of black people off the voter rolls of Florida. They said that these black people were felons, criminals, not allowed to vote. In fact, their only crime was voting while black. They were completely innocent. And that's what won the 2000 election. In 2004, the Republicans came up with a new scheme, which was called caging. And what it was, they sent letters to people at their voting addresses, and if they weren't home, they challenged their right to vote, which is quite... Now, you'd think that, okay, if they're not at their registration address, maybe they are fraudulent. But they were sending the letters to soldiers who were, like, in Iraq. In other words, you go to Iraq and you lose your vote. That's mission accomplished. A lot of the soldiers now are not too crazy about their commander-in-chief. They don't want to be there, so they want out. So they don't want them to vote. They sent letters to students at African-American universities during the summer when they weren't there, and they challenged their vote. So there you go.
Now the challenge...
The question is, are they stealing it now in 2008? And Kennedy and I have taken the position, no, they haven't. They're not going to steal it. They've already stolen it. That is, they've stolen several million votes via purging the voter rolls. So look out. I mean, you may not be on the voter rolls when you show up to vote, especially people with Spanish double names and Islamic names, because Muhammad is often written different ways in the records, and therefore
if your name,
they'll knock your name off.
So what you're saying, Greg, is if your name is misspelled, then that's not you.
Right. So what happens is that a lot of people, for example, you might have Muhammad spelled one way on your voter form,
right,
another way on your driver's license, because the government clerks get it all wrong. And as a result, you lose your vote. This is brand new under a new law called the Help America Vote Act, which is George Bush is helping us vote, which is not too safe. So what we did was we put together a comic book on how to steal it back. It was how to preserve your vote, get it back, and also the story of our investigation about how they're mucking with the elections. So the comic book is called Steal Back Your Vote, and you can get it at stealbackyourvote.org. Also, you can get there. Bobby Kennedy and I this week have come out with an article, Block the Vote in Rolling Stone magazine, which you can get at stealbackyourvote.org for free. You can download it.
Okay. So now tell me, how are they doing it now, and in what states, and also what are we talking about here? How many votes are we talking about?
We're talking about 3 million votes, about maybe more, 3 to 6, but at least 3 million votes. In Colorado, for example, the Republican Secretary of State has removed 1 out of 5 voters' names from the voter rolls. 1 out of 5 voters' names from the voter rolls. I mean, it's absolutely astonishing. And then George Bush, her name is Danetta Davidson, appointed Danetta to be the chairwoman of the United States Elections Assistance Commission. And so you end up with, so that's where she became like the, Bush, I think, was going to call her the Purgeon General. But Karl Rove said that was a little bit too obvious. That's one of the bad jokes, by the way, from Steal Back Your Vote, the comic book. But, so 1 in 5 in Colorado, that's where we expect the theft. That's going to be the Florida and Ohio of 2008. New Mexico, 1 in 9 voters are missing. There's an attack on foreclosed voters in Ohio and Florida. Florida is going to be bad once again. Once again, Florida is where they're stealing votes left and right by not letting people. One of the new gimmicks is before you can add your name to the voter rolls, they have to verify your identity. We've never had to do that before. That's where one of the big problems comes in with Islamic and Spanish names, foreign-sounding names that they're not used to putting in the computers. They mess it up, and you lose your vote. For example, 85,000 people in Florida who thought they had just registered to vote have been challenged by the Republican Party because their names don't match some database. Well, it doesn't mean that there's a bunch of fraudulent voters. It means that the government records are all screwed up. We've never done this. We've never done this before in America because we don't have to. People do not steal votes. I'm telling you that right now. Governments steal votes from people, but people don't steal votes. We've only had 24 people in 4 years who have been convicted of voting fraud crime in the United States out of 178 million voters, just 24.
Greg,
so, if you want to, that's what I'm just going to tell you. Please get the comic book. It tells you how to steal back your vote, the steps you can take so that you don't become a voting victim.
Okay. Now, did you cover this story on your BBC programs?
Yes, I did. In fact, once again,
my follow-up Greg, my follow-up question is why the American media is not jumping on this story?
Because the American media is brain dead. It's commercialized, and you cannot say to the American people, your democracy is rotten through and through, because it's a message that basically the elite owners of the media outlets don't want to hear, and they don't want us to say.
Now, just to clarify,
there's no way I'm going to get this. There's no way I'm getting this story on U.S. TV.
Okay, just to clarify something for our view and audience here, you are an American. You're just a BBC reporter in America.
Yeah, well, I mean,
like you're not a crazy British who's trying to tell us how to do things.
Well, I'm a crazy American who is hoping we'll fix our system. I mean, the problem is it is ugly that I, as an American, have to go to London to report the news about my own country. And I'm with BBC Newsnight, which is probably one of the most prestigious news programs on the planet in the English language. And yet I can't get on. It's almost impossible for me to get on mainstream media in the U.S.
Okay. What about the Democratic Party? Why are they not doing anything about it? Are they confident that their guy's going to win? That's why they're not doing anything about it? They're not worried about it?
Well, number one, yeah, I think that they are feeling that they spend enough money on ads that they can win. Number two, Bobby Kennedy, my co-writer, says they're cowards. They don't want to take on the issue. No one wants to defend, as you can see with this stuff about calling Obama Muslim. So no one wants to defend Muslim voters if they lose their vote. No one wants to defend black voters if they lose their vote because they're called felons. They'll say, oh, you're defending criminals. So there's a gutlessness within the Democratic Party that has to be dealt with. The second thing that has to be dealt with is that some Democrats have been stealing votes too, and not from Republicans. For example, if you go into the comic book, Steal Back Your Vote, you'll see a story about how Native Americans and the Pueblos of New Mexico lost their votes. Their registrations just vanished. They were given something called provisional ballots. The ballots weren't counted because they didn't have envelopes for the ballots because they were never given envelopes by local officials. So in other words, the Native Americans lost their vote.